Hey class, this is your how-to video for laminating material for different types of projects you're doing. You gotta start with figuring out what width you need, and you'll choose either 2x4s or 2x6s in various lengths. All the material you cut will have to be the same length. You want to cut that a little bit longer than the finished project, probably give it an extra inch or two. And since you're making several cuts, you want to set up a stop block like this. And depending how the stock looks, either on the top or the bottom, if it looks okay, you're going to want to orient the wood grain alternating depending on what the end grain looks like, and that's just so that it shrinks and cups a little bit differently, so you have alternating end grain. Once you've got it figured out the way you want your top to look, draw yourself a triangle so that when you take it apart and put it back together, you can just solve that puzzle again. Then you're going to be jointing your project, so joint all the edges that are going to get glued together. This is the jointer. You of course will need to be taught how to use this machine, but the purpose of it is to create a square edge or a 90-degree edge on each piece of wood, and it makes it easy for it to glue together without any defects in the sides. Make sure you joint each piece of wood at least once or twice to make sure that it's got a nice flat square edge. Once you're ready to glue, you're going to lay down some newspaper because the glue is going to get everywhere, and you'll grab a couple of small clamps, reorient your puzzle, and maybe give it a dry clamp with no glue just to make sure the clamps are all working properly, and you don't have to go running for stuff once the glue is on and set. You need to glue each piece of wood individually, both sides, and then place them together. Don't be afraid to use too much glue within reason, but there should be quite a bit on there so that there's enough to squeeze out. You need to put a clamp on top and make sure that it's all pressed down and flat as possible. The glue should squeeze out something like this. Maybe this is a little much, but there needs to be enough that it gets into all those cracks and fills the joint. So a good idea to put that newspaper underneath, please. Once it's set for about an hour, you can give it a try and start getting some of that glue off. But if that glue leaves wet glue on the chisel and it's not quite ready to come off, depending how much glue you've used. After about 2 hours, you can take one of the clamps off, but just temporarily so that you can get the bulk of the glue off. The glue should still be sort of pliable. It's the best time to get it off, otherwise it's going to be hard as rock if you come back a day later. So as much as you can get off in the same day is better for you to save yourself some time. It's okay if you gouge out some of the wood as you're getting that glue off because you're going to plane it down anyways. Of course, always chisel away from yourself, and don't forget to put that clamp back on until at least the next day, and flip it over, do the other side, and try and get as much glue off as you can. The reason we want to get all that glue off is because the planer heads look like this, and any rock hard glue that goes through there ends up taking dents out of it, and that just impacts everybody else's project after you've gone through. One more time, this is the next day. After you've taken the clamps off, you just do a double check to make sure all the glue is off, and then we use the planer in Mr. Mackenzie's lab or the high school lab if it's a big enough project and we can't get it through the junior high planer. I'll need to check before you start. I need to check that all that glue is off of your project before you start planing it, and I'll be kind of watching you or helping you with all these steps because you need to learn how to use these machines before you start. This step is not really the safest way to do it. There's other ways to do this, but I should help you with this just to get this side squared up and to do a cross cut on the table saw. I should probably be using the miter saw or a miter sled in this step here. So this isn't a step I'd let most students do. Once you've got it cut to length, we're going to router the edges. You pick a detail that you want on yours, and you need to start with the end grain first. There's going to be some chipping that comes out the side of that first end grain cut. So if you do the end grain first, the next side, as you turn it around, will kind of take care of it and smooth it out. After this, you do some sanding, and then we can show you how to attach the top. You're going to drill 1 or 2 holes per side on an angle from the top, and then measure your piece, decide where it needs to go, and we'll drive screws from the inside into the top. You just need to make sure we use screws that are short enough. Take your time measuring and make sure it's in the right spot. You probably want to do one side then the other to make sure it hasn't slid around, and just kind of make sure that it's pressed down far enough that it's sucked all the way in. And that's how to attach the top.